Hello, a very warm good evening to all of you and welcome to Unacademy, one-stop destination for English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to the marathon session for the portion of Environment and Ecology under our Conquer Prelims series, where today we shall aim to provide the finishing touches to your preparation of Environment and Ecology. In the past 4 sessions that we have held, we have discussed more than around 60 to 65 topics with the help of various questions, and we have basically simplified places in news, species in news, the protected areas in news, the climate conventions in news, and covered the other important areas such as the aspect of flyways, migrations, etc., which are relevant for your exam. Today, we shall again be picking up significant number of topics which are relevant, which have been in news for the past year and a half, which you can revise for your examination. Today, while discussing the questions, we shall also be trying to simplify and provide you the much important and the much required chronology for the formation of various organizations, the conventions which have been put into place, and also give you an idea about the chronology of the national legislations associated with the portion of environment, which you can use as a kind of mind map for revision. Now, overall, the discussion of these topics which happen on a day-to-day basis, we have been doing this almost for a month now. Thereby, we hope that your preparation and your revision is going up to the mark. If you have liked this initiative of ours, please do like, share and subscribe the button given below. Now, having said that, let us initiate the discussion, but before that, an important announcement for your preparation of prelims. Other than these areas that you have revised, how to get used to the language which is used, how to get used to the mental conditioning which is required for the examination, that is the most vital part of elimination in the portion of prelims. And keeping that in mind, we have come up with the Unacademy All India Prelims Mock Test, which shall be held on 26th and 29th of May and on 2nd of June. This shall be followed by live analysis of the question paper immediately following that from around 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. and that is going to help you eliminate the mistakes. And again, just like how these discussions are going on with one particular question, we shall be discussing the surrounding topics so that your information set is getting incremented on a daily basis. So do attend this All India Prelims Mock Test. The question pattern is as representative as it can be. Now, there will be a live workshop for those of you who are interested in pursuing the preparation for the examination. So do attend the live workshop for understanding what IAS, IPS, and in fact the entire civil services examination offers for you as a kind of a career option, a viable career option, whether it is for you or not, and if yes, what do you need to do in order to pursue that preparation. So we will have a live workshop by Sarmat sir on Sunday, that is 26th of May at 11 a.m. So do attend this workshop live. Now, let us initiate the discussion with the help of the questions, starting with the first question. The first question is with regards to kelp forests. Kelp forests have remained in news for the past couple of years now, owing to the various different threats that they face and also owing to the role of other organisms in maintaining these forests. So let us understand that. With reference to the kelp forests, consider the following statements. Kelps are a dense population of algae which thrive in cold waters. They require shallow waters and are always found close to the shores. Sea urchins help kelps to grow large enough to form forests. Which of the statements given above are correct? Now here each of the statements will have certain key pointers from which you can distinguish. So they are a dense population of algae which thrive in colder waters. They require shallow waters and are found closer to the shores. And sea urchins, they help the kelps to grow in large numbers. So let us take a look at each of these statements individually, starting with the first statement. So they are dense population of algae which thrive in cold waters. Is that correct? Yes, this is correct answer. It is basically nothing but an overgrowth of algae, brown algae in particular. They require shallow waters. Yes, in order to carry out the process of photosynthesis, they need to be available closer to the surface of water so that they receive the sunlight and thereby they are able to carry out the process of photosynthesis. So this is also correct. Now, sea urchins help kelps to grow large enough to form forest. This is basically incorrect. Sea urchins are actually one of the biggest dangers that kelp forests face. Sea urchins, which are present in large population on the sea floor, particularly around the region of the continental shelves, they start consuming these kelps and they basically uproot the entire ecosystem, leading to a kind of a desertification almost. So that is why the third statement is basically incorrect. So here the correct answer is going to be A, that is 1 and 2 only. Majority of you have given the incorrect answer here. So understand this. Here you can have another question which can be framed, or another statement also which can be framed with regards to whether kelp forests are found only in tropical waters or only in temperate waters, or can they be found in both these areas? What do you think? Are they to be found only in tropical, only in temperate, or in both of these areas? So, when we talk about kelp forests, they are basically to be found in both tropical and temperate waters and oceans, but provided there needs to be a colder water region there. So within the tropics also, wherever you have colder water, so where will you have cold water in the region of tropics? In the areas where you have cold water oceanic currents. So we have oceanic currents of different types, warm oceanic currents as well as cold oceanic currents. So in those areas where you have cold oceanic currents, even within the tropics, for example, the Peru current, for example, when we talk about the Benguela current, when we talk about the California current, when we talk about the Canary current, these are cold water currents. They also create a situation conducive enough for the kelps to be growing closer to the shore, and that too within the tropics. So these are what the kelp forests appear to look like. And they are basically large brown algae. They live in cool, relatively shallow waters which appear closer to the shore. Now, some of these kelps, overall, if you take a look at these kelps, they have two basic varieties. One is where you have a shrub-like growth. A shrub-like growth is observed. Shrub-like growth means what? They don't grow very tall or very large. Their size is quite restricted, but they grow dense. And then you have those kelps which have a kind of an air bladder of sorts. Now, they absorb that sunlight, carry out photosynthesis, and they start floating and rising closer to the surface. So overall, you will observe that these kelps, they can grow significantly, sometimes more than 10 to 15 inches within a day is what the growth can be, provided the conditions are conducive enough. Now, they form a kind of a forested ecosystem because understand, they are producing food. They are carrying out photosynthesis and they can provide shelter as well. So they can host large number of biodiversity. But these kelp forests and the regions of kelp, they are basically nightmare for navigation. They are a nightmare for navigation of ships because many of the times what happens is that these kelp forests and these algae, they get stuck in the propellers of the ships, and that is when the breakdown can happen. Now here, one of the biggest danger that they face is in the form of these sea urchins. These sea urchins, they start gnawing at these kelp from the base itself. Now, in order to keep the population of sea urchins in check, nature has got its own mechanism. Now, that is the presence of sea otters. You would have seen these sea otters having significantly very thick skin and a very thick fur. They keep on floating across the water. Now, they consume these urchins. Okay, so in a way, sea otters are significantly helpful in maintenance of the kelp forest. So, sea otters, they are helpful in, or simply we can say, consume the sea urchins. Now, as a result of that, they allow the kelps to grow as large as they can. Now here, in ideal conditions, kelp can grow for 18 inches per day, which is quite significant. And in stark contrast to the various different types of corals, they have a canopy like a tree, which forms a very dense ecosystem closer to the surface, having a rich biodiversity. So they provide shelter to many of the organisms. So also like a terrestrial forest, in the case of terrestrial forest, you would have observed that during the rainy season, there is a larger greenery, larger amount of growth. But when the dry season comes in, then many of the trees, they dry out, and then the regeneration also tends to happen. So here also in the case of the kelps, owing to the ocean currents, owing to the various conditions of sea surface temperature, there is a kind of a variation which is observed. Now, storms and large weather events like El Nino can always impact the growth of these kelps. So, a rising sea surface temperature is a danger and is a threat that these kelps face. So, here also, from here, this is a vital point for your prelims as well. That can they be impacted by the El Nino phenomena or by the phenomena of climate change? The answer is absolutely yes. Okay, so that is why these kelp forests, which are spread across the globe, you will observe they are spread almost across the globe. Wherever you have colder waters which are present, wherever colder waters are present, there you will find the growth of kelp. Mostly in the region of temperate, but you cannot say that they are not present in tropical regions. So here, both tropical and temperate regions. Now here you can see you have a variety in terms of the type of kelp that you have, the shrub kind of kelp as well as the kelp with air bladders. So for both tropical regions and temperate areas, you will observe the kelp growth. Okay, that is the comprehensive understanding that you need to gain for this topic. Okay, now moving on to the next question, which is quite easy for that matter, but it has remained in news consistently for the last year. So which one of the following statements is correct with reference to the Shoonya campaign that was recently in the news? So, it is a zero pollution e-mobility campaign launched with a joint collaboration between India and WHO. The campaign aims to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles in the rural delivery segment. It intends to reduce the pollution by promoting the use of electric vehicles for ride-hailing and for deliveries. And the objective is to create consumer awareness about the benefits of clean cooking solution. So out of these, where is it that you will find the most relevant and the closest answer for the Shoonya campaign? Take a look at it carefully and then arrive at your answer. What is this Shoonya campaign? So it is basically a campaign which has been launched and it has been in news. Significantly, you will observe that Niti Aayog has been very prominent and has been the force behind this Shoonya campaign. So it is Niti Aayog's entire plan and the program which is launched to reduce the level of air pollution carried out by the transportation sector. So here, by promotion of the electric vehicles in various service delivery platforms, in various services sector, etc., there also the emission caused by the transportation sector is huge. So reducing it is important. A is incorrect because it is not a joint collaboration with WHO. Right? Campaign aims to accelerate the adoption of EVs for rural delivery. That is also incorrect. And objective to create consumer awareness about benefits of clean cooking solutions. That is also incorrect. So here the correct answer is C. Okay. Now here overall you will observe the air pollution by accelerating the adoption of electric vehicles for the last mile delivery. Now overall the aim is to increase the awareness level. If people are more aware about the utility, about the benefit of these electric vehicles, that is when the adoption will also be faster. And then recognize and support industry initiatives so that the entire fleet of delivery personnel, let's suppose for a logistics company, let's suppose for a ride-hailing platform, if all of them shift to an electric vehicle, the transportation emission, which contributes close to around 24% of our overall contribution to air pollution in the country, varying from city to city, but on an average. So that means that a large chunk of greenhouse gas emitted from the country can be brought under check, and put the sector of last mile deliveries in order to ensure a complete electrification. Because with the rise of e-commerce, the rise of various quick delivery platforms, the number of vehicles on the road has been increasing. Now here you have three major components of the Shoonya campaign: corporate branding program, so that the major corporates are able to identify and take the initiative by its own; consumer awareness drive, so that the consumers also remember what we talked about. Responsible consumption will always lead to responsible production. So if the consumers are much more aware about, let's suppose, what is it that is being used, if a particular ride-hailing platform is using electric vehicles, the other ones are using diesel, electric vehicles being more conducive, more silent, more efficient, that awareness needs to be raised. And also enabling the entire system, ecosystem, with a kind of a resource toolkit. Now, for the adoption of electric vehicles, India has been carrying out various processes, and various programs are being promoted by the government at various levels also. So amongst them, one of that is Amrit Portal. One is obviously the very common FAME scheme, the phase 2 of which has been released. Another is the Amrit Portal, which was launched on the at the time of the 26th Conference of Parties to UNFCCC, which was held in Glasgow in UK. So it was created and managed by Niti Aayog as a part of UK-India joint roadmap. So Amrit Portal is associated with what? That question can also be expected. Okay. Now, the other important scheme that you would have read in the portion of various government schemes which is relevant is the FAME scheme. Now, the FAME scheme was launched earlier. The government has come up with the phase 2 of the scheme, which was implemented in 2019 with a budgetary outlay of massive around 10,000 crores. But obviously, the amount required, the support system required is much larger. Not only including the adoption of electric vehicles, but developing the entire ecosystem around it, including charging structures, the charging points at various distribution areas, at various different transportation routes also. So it focuses on supporting electrification of public and shared transport and aims to support through incentive for the demand for buses, three-wheelers, then four-wheeler passenger cars and two-wheelers as well. Creation of charging infrastructure is also supported under the phase 2 of the FAME scheme. Okay? I hope that is understood. Please understand, here you can have a question which can be framed as well, that Shoonya Campaign, Amrit Portal, FAME 2, they are associated with which of the schemes of the government? And there the correct answer can be that associated with the adoption of electric mobility. Okay, so these kind of questions you have to be expectant of. Now, a question regarding the generations of biofuel. Yesterday we have had a discussion about that. So consider the following statements with reference to the ethanol blending recently in news. Bamboo and woody biomass are the sources for the production of first generation ethanol or the first generation biofuel. Producing first generation ethanol requires lesser groundwater consumption than the third generation ethanol. Usage of ethanol blended petrol can lead to substantial reduction in emissions of both carbon monoxide and nitrous oxide. Ethanol blended petrol program of Government of India holds potential in saving India's foreign exchange reserves. How many of the above statements is or are correct? Only one, only two, only three, or all of them? Here, take a look at this. So here you need to understand what are the various generations of biofuel. So overall you have, for practical purposes, 3 generations, but for theoretical purposes you have 4 generations of biofuels. And in order to promote that biofuel utility, you had the promotion and the conceptualization of the Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Mission. That was for promotion of biofuels. So here majority of you have given the answer, that is B. Let us take a look at the statements. Bamboo and woody biomass are the source of production of first generation ethanol. This is incorrect. The first generation biofuel or the first generation ethanol is largely produced by the food items, for example corns, for example sugarcane, etc. So that is where you have that utility and that production. Producing first generation ethanol requires lesser groundwater consumption than the third generation ethanol. So first generation ethanol, which utilizes the food stock or the feed stock rather, they require maximum availability of water in order to carry out the fermentation process. So this is also incorrect. Then usage of ethanol blended petrol can lead to substantial reduction in emissions of both carbon monoxide and also nitrous oxide. So you have to understand that, look, when we talk about ethanol blended petrol, there is a greater efficiency, there is a greater amount of combustion which happens, but at the end of it, the emission of carbon monoxide can be reduced. There is also a research which indicates that the emission of carbon dioxide also reduces. But what about nitrous oxide? Nitrous oxide is basically produced from many of the times from the fuel mix, many of the times depending upon the type of catalytic converters that you have in the vehicle, depending upon the type of engines that you have. So that is why nitrous oxide, whether that proportion would be reduced or not, that cannot be determined simply by using ethanol blended petrol. So here, while carbon monoxide emission can reduce, but nitrous oxide, that won't reduce. Then ethanol blended program of the Government of India holds the potential for saving India's foreign exchange reserves. This is going to be correct because India is a net importer of fossil fuel, particularly crude oil, and that is where you have the maximum amount of foreign exchange, significant amount of foreign exchange which is spent. So once we start blending ethanol, that is when you will observe that the overall saving of petroleum will happen. So here, how many of the statements are correct? The answer is A, that is only one statement. So around 8% of you have given the correct answer. So I hope now we understand this. In third, it says it can. Right. So by that logic, you can put any particular kind of emission and emittent here, that it can reduce the emission of lead also, it can reduce the emission of everything. Please understand this, that ethanol blending is what? What is ethanol blending? Is it the case that petroleum is completely replaced and now you are using only ethanol? No. There is still around 80-20 mixture. So 80% petroleum you are still using. Other than that, you have the significant utility of various filtering devices which are out there. They are very, very relevant. So that is why it is not carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide emissions overall have been found to reduce, but nitrous oxide, nitrogen dioxide, those emissions have not been found to be reduced simply by ethanol blending. For reducing that, you need further amount better and more developed aspirated engines. For example, you would have seen Bharat 4, Bharat 6 category engines, and also better development of catalytic converters and better filters. Okay, so that is why third is incorrect. Okay, I understand that many of us are possessive about our answer, but this is basically dependent upon the fact here. Now, so here you have the 4 generations of biofuels which are indicated. The first generation. So first generation of biofuel is basically produced by edible biomass, sugar cane, wheat, corn kernels, etc. They can be utilized, and their biofuel is generated by carrying out the process of fermentation. Second generation, this is where you have various different inputs like, for example, bamboo, woody biomass. They come under the category of second generation. Third generation is where you are producing ethanol by carrying out the algal biomass and its fermentation. The fourth generation, through the process of pyrolysis, solar to fuel conversion, engineered algae, gasification. So that is where you work on the microscopic level and you devise it in the lab. So as you move from first generation to fourth generation, utility of water tends to reduce, and that too reduces quite drastically. So here if you take a look at the first generation biofuels, soybean, sugarcane, maize, these are regarded as the edible food sources which help produce that. So the process of production is simple. It is cheaper as well, then it is well established and no intensive pre-treatments are required for that. Whereas the disadvantages, it can lead to food scarcity. If we start utilizing sugarcane, corn, maize, etc. for production of fuel, then what about the food that we require? And owing to climate change, the planet is already staring at a condition of food scarcity. So here you have high land use, high fresh water use. So it is significantly expensive in that way. It utilizes a lot of your resources. Second generation biofuel, organic waste, kitchen waste that you have, wood, agricultural residues. So there you can utilize those waste. So there can be an establishment of a kind of a circular economy, right? So it bypasses the food versus fuel conflict because you are not using a food source directly. You are using the extract, the waste of it, which otherwise you would have maybe thrown away, right? So limited amount of biomass is present, and the waste, it is not as if you simply pick up the waste from the garbage can and you can produce ethanol. There is a lot of pre-treatment, filtration, etc. which is required. So these are the set of advantages and disadvantages associated with each generation of biofuel. Third generation of biofuel, there you can use the microbes, algal organisms in order to produce that, and in this case even the biomass that was earlier used will no longer be required. And fourth generation, if you take a look at it, so basically it is very, very efficient, and here directly by gasification, trapping of gases, etc. there also you can produce these biofuels. Okay, I hope this is understood. Now moving on to the next question. Consider the following statements. with reference to the Montreal Protocol, which has remained in news throughout the last year. Now, India has been a party to the Montreal Protocol since its inception. Both developing and developed countries have binding and time-targeted commitments under the agreement. At present, India has successfully phased out methyl bromide and methyl chloroform in compliance to the Montreal Protocol. Which of the statements given above is or are correct here? So, Montreal Protocol is about the repair and the preservation of the ozone layer, right? So that is one of the most successful international protocols which has been arrived at. So Montreal Protocol and the success of it, the adherence and acceptance of it has also ensured that the ozone layer is well on its path to recovery. The depletion or the ozone hole is not increasing in an unsubstantial manner. It is basically recovering itself. It is expected that within the next couple of decades, it will significantly recover to 1970s level. Now, India has been in news along with the Montreal Protocol because India has successfully managed to eliminate one of the variant of HCFC, and for the other HCFCs kind of gases, there also India's progress is way ahead of the target that the Global Committee had given. So here, first statement, India has been a party to the Montreal Protocol. Majority of you have given the answer as 1. That is A. Okay. So, the first statement, India has been a party to the Montreal Protocol since its inception. No. India became a member around 1992-93. So the first statement in itself is incorrect. That understanding will automatically lead you to the correct answer by the process of elimination. As I already told you, UPSC might provide you, might not provide you with the liberty and the luxury of elimination. Here we do that so that you have a comfort, so that you understand what language to decipher. Both developing and developed countries have binding and time-targeted commitments. This is correct. Under the Kigali Amendment, countries like India, China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, US, UK, all of them have been given differential arrangements and differential targets under the Kigali Amendment. So that is why the second is correct. India has successfully phased out methyl bromide and methyl chloroform in compliance with the Montreal Protocol. Along with that, India has also been overachieving the target for elimination of HCFCs. Till now, all the HCFCs we have not eliminated. Till now, some of the HCFCs are still there, but we are well on our way to overachieve our target. So here the correct answer is going to be B, that is 2 and 3 only. 26% of you had given the correct answer. Kigali Agreement, it was a Kigali Amendment. Kigali Amendment was signed in 2016. It basically started coming into force from 2019-20 onwards. Okay, so this is why it was in news. Ozone Day. When is Ozone Day celebrated? It is celebrated around 16th of September. That is why it was in news. And throughout last year, after the Scientific Research Committee had found out that the ozone hole is repairing, there have been multiple editorial pieces being written about the success of Montreal Protocol. So if all the editorial pieces are concentrating upon it, automatically tells you that this topic can be important for your prelims exam. Now, when we talk about Montreal Protocol, let us understand the flow pattern of that also. So earlier you had Vienna Convention. Vienna Convention was followed by the Montreal Protocol. The difference between convention and protocol, how many of us are comfortable with that? Understand this carefully, those of us who have doubt. When we talk about a convention, when we talk about a protocol, what is the difference? In very simple language, let's suppose 5 of you get together. 5 of you get together and sit in a coffee shop, let's say, and you decide that you will prepare for civil services examination. That means you have set a goal. When will you achieve that, or when will you clear that civil services examination? Which optional subject will you choose? When will you complete the GS portions? Whether will you take a guidance or not? How will you carry out revision? That is not decided. The goal is decided, right? So that is a convention. But let's suppose 5 of you, after that you went home, and after a week, all of you realized that we have set ourselves a lofty goal, a lofty objective. But how to achieve that? We have not worked that out. So all of you again come together. Let's suppose you sit in one of the fast food chain outlets like Domino's or somewhere. And then you chalk out a detailed plan that, okay, GS preparation, I'll do it in 2 months or 4 months. This is when I'll take guidance. This is the optional that we will choose. This is when we go for answer writing. This is when we go for current affairs revision. So you go for a detailed analysis, a detailed target setting in order to achieve that larger goal. So that earlier decision that you took, that would be the convention. And then again, when you sat at Domino's to decide that, that will be the protocol to the convention. So protocol basically sets a target, a targeted achievable goal that you have to achieve in order to achieve the overall objective that you have set. That is why you will find that, for example, Convention on Biological Diversity, Cartagena Protocol, Nagoya Protocol, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Kyoto Protocol, Vienna Convention, Montreal Protocol. So in many of the cases, you will find that the conventions are followed by a protocol, which talks about the guiding principle and sets a goal which has to be achieved. Now here, this Montreal Protocol has gone through multiple different amendments. So not all of the amendments are important. For example, you had a London amendment. Now, through these amendments, various different gases, ozone depleting substances, they are being added and they are removed, and goal setting is also pushed on aggressively. Then you had the Copenhagen Amendment, but that was not so major. Amongst the major, you had another Montreal Amendment to mark the 10 years of the signing of the protocol. Then it was found out that many countries, while they have declared that they are not using the ozone depleting substances anymore, but there is production and there is sale from those countries. So that is where you had the Beijing Amendment. Right. These were few of the amendments, but the most important amendment out of all of these is the Kigali Amendment. It talks about why it is important and why Kigali is so exemplary is because of the fact that different goals had been set up. It works on the basic principle of common but differentiated responsibility, that the developed nations who have developed their economy based upon the emission of these ozone depleting substances, they have to reduce their emissions first, right? And then will come the time of, let's suppose, the underdeveloped countries like India, which lie in the tropics. So the requirement of these chemicals which can deplete ozone, it is maximum in these warm countries. That is why Kigali Amendment is important. Now, here a question is also sometimes framed that Montreal Protocol has been or was arrived in order to fight climate change. Along with ozone depletion, it was brought in to fight climate change. That is a strict no. Okay, it is at the time, and the entire text of Montreal Protocol that you will go through, it does not talk about fighting climate change. It talks about reducing the emission of what? Reducing the emission of ODS. Okay, the ozone depleting substances. Now, ozone depleting substances, for example, sulfur hexafluoride, for example, HCFCs, for example, CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, then various different halide groups, then eventually you had the use of HFCs. HFCs were thought to be an alternative which can preserve the ozone layer. But later on it was found that HFCs, while they are preserving the ozone layer, they are simultaneously causing global warming as well. So that is where the Kigali Amendment talks about the elimination of even these HFCs. Now, when we talk about ozone depleting substances, can they be produced by nature, or is it something produced by anthropogenic factors alone? What do you think? Can it be produced by nature? So, these ozone depleting substances, they can be of two types. One is natural. For example, let's suppose, and another is anthropogenic. So what is the natural one? Let's suppose you have a volcanic eruption, and due to that volcanic eruption, huge plumes of gases are released and they can puncture through the region of the stratosphere all the way up till mesosphere. For example, when you had the Tonga eruption in the month of January 2022, now Tonga eruption in the southern portion of Pacific, that released an ash cloud which reached up till the height of even mesosphere. So you can think about it that the ozone hole obviously would be punctured by these kind of events. If you have a large scale forest fire, these events can also end up impacting the ozone layer. So you have both natural as well as anthropogenic factors which are responsible. Now, Kigali Amendment entered into force on 1st of Jan 2019 and has been ratified by around 65 countries. Goal is to achieve 80% reduction in HFC. See, earlier, the entire companies, when it comes to refrigeration sector, when it comes to air conditioning sector, cold storage sector, fire retardants, fire extinguishing area, in all of those earlier, chlorofluorocarbons were used. Now, at the time of the signing of the Montreal Protocol, already there was a lot of discussion throughout the 80s that how this chlorofluorocarbon is disastrous, right? So, Montreal Protocol talked about elimination of these chlorofluorocarbons, and the industry came up with a replacement that, look, hydrochlorofluorocarbon, they are much safer. It was found out that even these HCFCs, they are also depleting the ozone layer. And then came the alternative HFC. This is safe when it comes to ozone layer, but can cause global warming. Safe with respect to ozone layer, but here causes Is the audio available now, guys? It works fine? Thank you. No voice. No, I have my voice. It might not be audible to you. The voice is still there. There's a big difference. So here, coming back to it, basically, the first group of countries whereby you have countries like US, UK, EU, the developed countries who have the technological prowess and also the financial power that they can adapt and they can go for a newer method of production, a newer technological innovation. They have to cut these emissions first. So here they have already started to phase down and reduce the emissions to 15% of 2012 levels by 2036. Then the second group has got a target such as China, Brazil, the emerging economies, the economies which are doing well. So here, reduce the emissions to 20% of 2021 levels by 2045. And then you have the countries in the tropics and a bit poorer countries, for example, India, Pakistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, where the cooling requirements are very high. They will start cutting down by 2028, and we have to reduce to 15% of 2024 levels by 2047. So 2036, 2045 and 2047. Now, India Cooling Action Plan, or ICAP, which was a national program which has been launched by India in order to reduce the emissions caused by the cooling sector. We had discussed it already. So that is well on its way to overachieve this target, and the target set by the government is much more ambitious than what the Kigali Amendment can put for it. Okay? Now moving on to the next question. HFC, what is the alternative to HFC, Arvindan? Basically carbon-based compounds without the halogens and the halide group. So those carbon-based compounds are being experimented and they are the alternative. Okay? Refineries and industrial boilers, they are also sources of ozone pollution. Yes. So the Enhancing Climate Resilience of India's Coastal Communities project, which was recently in news, is funded by which one of the following? Here, Climate Works Foundation, Green Climate Fund, Global Environment Facility, and the World Bank. Which of them are basically responsible in terms of the financial help and the financial assistance for helping the coastal communities become resilient in the aim or in the face of global climate change and global warming? Voice problem again? Is there an audio issue? No? Okay. So here majority of you have basically given the correct answer. That is good to see. So this is basically the Green Climate Fund, GCF. Now, when was GCF established? Let's take a look at it. And what is the purpose of it? So it funded the project of this entire resilience building of the coastal communities. And here, 3 states, that is Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra and Odisha, with the help of UNDP as the accredited entity, is being carried out. So here UNDP, United Nations Development Program, is also involved because it requires building up the resilient ecosystem, resilient method of livelihood, income, all of that to be done by the coastal communities. So that is where here the human development also has to be kept in mind. So it supports the government of India to make the vulnerable coastal areas resilient to climate change. That is what this program is about. In how many states? In 3 states. Okay? Only across the east coast? Only across the west coast? No. Across both the coastal areas. You have across the region of Maharashtra also, across Odisha and Andhra Pradesh also. So the goals: conduction of coastal vulnerability assessment, right? Protection and restoration of coastal ecosystems, strengthening governance and institutional frameworks. So by this, there is an aim to build a sustainable and there's an aim to build a resilient entire livelihood ecosystem. Now, Green Climate Fund It was established in 2010. Many of the candidates confuse GCF with Global Environment Facility. Please don't commit that mistake. Both of them are different. So Green Climate Fund established in 2010, right? Financial mechanism established as per UNFCCC, and the same purpose is done. For example, it is one of the largest financial funding bodies for funding climate change related activities and various different programs. So it funds the adaptation drives many of the times, alternative projects to reduce the emissions, whatever is the goal set by the Paris Agreement also to reduce the level of warming by 2 degrees Celsius, and an ambitious goal to reduce it to around 1.5 degrees. So it is the world's largest fund, and it helps support the developing countries raise and realize their nationally determined contribution. Nationally determined contribution was established when? It was put to force as a result of the Paris Agreement. Okay? Now, another one of these kind of questions. Which one of the following has recently launched the Green Fins Hub, a global digital platform for sustainable marine tourism? Was in news due to relation to Loss and Damage Fund and Sharm el-Sheikh Conference of Parties. Yes, it was, but Green Climate Fund has been in news almost every year due to some funding or the other which is required there. So which one of the following has recently launched the Green Fins Hub for a global digital platform for sustainable marine tourism? Let's see. Global Environment Facility, United Nations Environmental Programme, IPCC and IUCN. Good. So here, this has been launched by United Nations Environment Programme. Now this basically is to promote sustainable tourism, because it is the over tourism in many of the coastal areas, for example diving, snorkeling, boating, etc., which causes damage to the critical ecosystem such as coral reefs, and there's a cascading and a long-term impact which the coastal communities have to face. So that is why coastal communities, in the sense biodiversity, and an indirect impact on the coastal population as well. Right? So here UNEP launches the worldwide digital platform to encourage sustainable marine tourism. So here exchange of best practices. Many of the times you see what is the problem is that in the coastal areas, many of the times you will find that there is some invasive alien species which has come in, and that is killing the coral population, that is leading to a reduction in the decline in the coral population. Now you might not be aware about how to, or the people in that area, the scuba divers, the trainers, they might not be aware that how to deal with those kind of invasive alien species. That is where this digital platform will come to help, where it can connect people across various different geographies, people across different areas, so that they can not only exchange best practices, but there can be a greater understanding and research also which can be carried out. Okay, so that is the basic purpose. So it is the proven conservation management approach implemented by whom? The Reef World Foundation and UNEP. Okay, now it was originally established in Thailand. The Fins Hub was originally established because, understand, it is these tropical waters which are burdened with a kind of overpopulation and over tourism. Adoption and implementation of best practices in the diving and snorkeling tourism industry. Okay, the two major threats, when we talk about the two major threats that the coastal coral ecosystems face from us, one is this tourism, over tourism. The second is basically the aspect of fishing. Unsustainable fishing practices such as bottom trawling. These are the dangerous ones. Other than that, the rise in sea surface temperature, pollution, these are the factors, but these are fishing, over-tourism, these are the direct impact creators. Okay? Now, this will help diving and snorkeling operators worldwide to have cost-efficient changes to their daily practices and to keep track of the annual improvements and monitor those improvements overall. Now, coming to the question regarding NDCs. With reference to India's updated nationally determined contribution, recently in news, consider the following statements. The updated NDC added sector-specific mitigation commitment to India's NDC targets. India's updated NDC is expected to be implemented between 2021 and 2030. According to the latest nationally determined contribution, India is now committed to reducing its GDP emissions intensity by 45% by 2030 from 2005 levels. So, which of the statements given above is or are correct? Think about it. Which can be incorrect here? Even if, let's suppose, we are not aware of the answer, still apply your mind. There are hidden points, hidden traces, hidden clues within the statement itself. The statement has been designed in such a way so that you are able to decipher it. Okay, think about it. I like the confidence with which you say that C is obviously incorrect. Okay. So here, basically the first, the updated NDC added sector-specific mitigation commitments to India's NDC target. Was there a sector-specific mitigation commitment? No. There was an overall commitment which was made. Then India's updated NDC is expected to be implemented between the year 2021 to 2030. That is correct. Then according to the latest nationally determined contribution, as per the Panchamrit goal that India had set up. When was this Panchamrit goal announced by India? At the Conference of Parties number 26, which was held in Glasgow in UK on December 2021. That is when India declared its target of achieving net zero by 2070, having 50% of renewables and also reducing the intensity, carbon intensity in GDP by around 45%. So this is where India took a step which was much more aggressive than its earlier declaration. So this is also going to be correct, right? I hope that is understood. So here the correct answer is 2 and 3 only. So here basically what do we mean by reducing emission intensity of GDP by 45%? What is the meaning of that? What do we understand that emission intensity? So let's suppose GDP of any particular country, the production is dependent upon many of the industries, iron and steel, cement, power generation, right? Coal mining, agriculture, many of the industries are there. All of them, they provide and contribute to the GDP. Now, let's suppose when we talk about industries such as iron and steel, their contribution is X amount. Let's suppose when we talk about agriculture, their contribution to GDP is also, let's suppose, Y amount. Now, all of these are emitting as well, right? So, the emission intensity represents that your contribution or whatever the GDP that a country is getting, what is the contribution of the individual sectors in terms of carbon emission? So, when you hear the term reducing the emission intensity by 45% means what? That the emitting areas of the GDP, either they will be transitioned to a greener functioning and greener economic scenario, or these emitting areas, their proportion in the overall GDP cake, that would be reduced. Okay, so that is basically, as compared to 2005 level, it will be reduced by around 45% by the year 2030. Okay, now, by the way, I hope we all are aware about NDCs, Nationally Determined Contribution, what is sometimes also referred to as INDC. What does I stand for? Is it India's Nationally Determined Contribution? Is that the case? International Nationally Determined Contribution? No. It is Intended Nationally Determined Contribution. What is the country's own intent in terms of its contribution to combat climate change? So that is intended, not internal, not international. It is intended. What is the intent? Okay. So here INDC has been a part of the Paris Agreement, where the countries have to set their own goals. There is a no global goal principle. Unlike Kyoto Protocol, you don't have a global goal setting. You have the countries having their own goal setting. For example, just to put in analogy, let's suppose I come to your workplace and I ask you that in this week you have to finish the entirety of polity and geography as well. Now, you might be able to do that, you might not be able to do that, but at the end of the day, you will always have the excuse that, look, the goal that you set up was very aggressive and I could never achieve it. So in order to get rid of these excuses, the easiest way is to do what? That you yourself set your goal. That in the month of May, what is it that you will study? Right? Then you set a goal that in the month of June, what you will study. Provided the condition that the target for June automatically has to be incremental from the target that you set in May. And every 5 years, there will be verification in the form of global stock take. So INDC, it is verified with the help of global stock take. Okay? Mechanism every 5 years. That is a differentiating factor for Paris Agreement, right? Now, by 2030, India plans to have around 50% of the electrical power from non-fossil fuel-based energy sources, right? So for that, international finance, GCF, everything is being tapped into. Various different developmental loans are being given to India in order to increase its renewable energy generation, which is being done. Now moving on to the next question about another topic which has been in significant amount of news coverage. Recently, India launched MethaneSAT on board Falcon 9 rocket to help measure methane emissions across the world. So MethaneSAT has remained in news. So that brings methane again under limelight. Our NDC and C, I'll come to your question, Tushar. Reduction in methane emissions is one of the strategies of climate change adaptation. Global Methane Pledge is an initiative of UNFCCC to collectively reduce methane emissions by at least 30% below 2020 levels by 2030. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? Think about it. So Tushar, you had a question, are NDC and CBDR related? More or less, yes. The Paris Agreement also slightly follows the principle of CBDR, common but differentiated responsibility. But slowly and steadily at the Conference of Parties since COP27, it has been found out that the developed countries, they are forming a group, a lobby, and pressurizing the developing countries like India, and they are diluting the entire principle of CBDR. So that is why it is CBDR as a principle is at risk. That is where at every conference of party nowadays, for example, even in this conference of party, even that last conference of party also, there is always a heated exchange between the Indian delegates and one of the developed countries delegate. This time it happened between the delegates led by India, representing all the small island groups, and the delegates represented by Australia. So there was a lot of tussle, again about the dilution of CBDR. So here, recently India launched MethaneSAT on board the Falcon 9 rocket to help measure methane emissions. So here, MethaneSAT was launched. It was launched on board the Falcon 9 rocket. It was launched to monitor the methane emissions, but it was not launched by India. So the first statement is incorrect. Reduction in methane emission is one of the strategies of climate change adaptation. 51% of you feel that this is correct. So understand, there's a difference between adaptation and mitigation. What is the difference? Adaptation is how you adapt to climate change. The climate change is happening, and how do you adapt to it? So adapting to climate change is not by reducing methane emissions. Mitigation is prevention. So you can prevent climate change by reducing the methane emissions. So it is not a strategy of climate change adaptation, it is a strategy of climate change mitigation. So the second portion is incorrect, regardless of, and you had a majority of people here thinking it is correct. So this is what you have to be watchful of, these individual words. Global Methane Pledge is an initiative of UNFCCC. This was arrived at when? This was arrived at COP26, Conference of Parties 26, held in Glasgow in December 2021. That is when the Global Methane Pledge was arrived at. So here the correct answer is going to be C, that is 3 only. Okay, so please be on the lookout for this. Is India a party of this Global Methane Pledge? Yes or no? Is India a party to Global Methane Pledge? The answer is no. Right? It was a plan which was initiated by European Union, by US and various other countries. India basically felt that being a party of this pledge will put its agricultural sector under a lot of pressure. That is why, because methane emissions, other than the energy sector, the major contributor is agricultural sector. So that is why India did not want to have the impact on the farming community as of now. That is why India chose not to be a party of this pledge. So here, methane overall is the second largest contributor to the global warming after carbon dioxide. Here you have to understand that per particle, and listen to this very carefully, this is where many of you commit mistakes. Per particle, impact and ability to cause warming is much higher in the case of methane as compared to carbon dioxide. So per molecule, methane is much more dangerous than carbon dioxide when it comes to warming. But then why do we consider it to be the second largest contributor? For two reasons. Methane, when it comes to methane and carbon dioxide, methane has got lower concentration in the atmosphere. For example, here methane concentration in atmosphere is something that you measure in the form of parts per billion rather than parts per million, which is utilized for measuring the concentration of carbon. Then other than that, you also have lower life cycle duration. What does that mean? That while carbon dioxide can stay intact in the atmosphere for a much longer period of time, methane actually undergoes dissipation. It reacts with the hydroxyl ions and produces carbon dioxide and water vapor as a result. So it is what is referred to as a short-lived climate pollutant, SLCP, in the category where you have black carbon or soot also belonging to short-lived climate pollutants, where you have these emissions, you have these pollutants, but they don't remain in the atmosphere for a long time. They will either dissipate, or they will get deposited. So this is example, soot or black carbon, which is an aerosol, right? So that is an example here. So according to UNEP, over a period of 20 years, methane is 80 times more potent at warming as compared to CO2. Now the problem here is that there have been emitters of methane and we are unable to realize that. There is no proper global monitoring. So in order to solve that purpose, you had scientists from Harvard, New Zealand and some NGOs who worked together to develop MethaneSAT. So the entity behind that is EDF, or Environmental Defense Fund. That is the one which is responsible for MethaneSAT, and in partnership with Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, Harvard University and the New Zealand Space Agency. These are the partners. The MethaneSAT, which was launched, will move around the planet around 15 times a day, particularly monitoring the energy sector, because the energy sector has got a lot of methane which is emitted. And you know, methane is also relevant and a very important constituent in the production of ground level ozone. Ground level ozone, if you have read about it, it is what is referred to as the bad ozone. So for that production of bad ozone, what do you need? You need nitrous oxides and volatile organic compounds to be reacting in the presence of sunlight. So methane is amongst one of those compounds which will lead to the production of ground level ozone. So the data collected by MethaneSAT is public for free of cost, so that there can be transparency as well. Okay? Now observe, this is what the MethaneSAT will be indicating in the form of data, the sources of emission and what is the amount and intensity of emission from these individual sources. That is the aim of MethaneSAT. Okay? Now, then moving on to a conceptual question regarding UNFCCC, but with the help of this, we shall try to arrive at a flow chart with regards to the conventions here. Consider the following statements with reference to the Conference of Parties to the UNFCCC, which was recently in news. The Conference of Parties is the supreme decision-making body of the UNFCCC. No region can be the host of Conference of Parties for 2 consecutive years. The Conference of Parties presidency of UNFCCC rotates amongst 5 recognized UN regions only. Till date, India has not hosted the Conference of Parties for UNFCCC. How many statements given above is or are correct? Think about it. Kavi, yes, the initiative was led by US, EU, but overall under the aegis of UNFCCC. Countries had started talking about global methane pledge, that what do we need to do. But it was the initiative of UNFCCC, the Conference of Parties, isn't it? Dead body decomposition also leads to methane release. Yes, that is correct. Here, the first statement, Conference of Parties is the supreme decision-making body of the UNFCCC. Correct answer. For any convention, generally it is the Conference of Parties which is the highest decision-making body. No region can be the host of Conference of Parties for 2 consecutive years. There is no such norm like that. In fact, the first and the second Conference of Parties, both of them were held in the region of Western Europe itself. So that is why there is no such designated rule like that. The Conference of Party presidency of UNFCCC rotates amongst the 5 recognized UN regions only. This is correct. Then, till date, India has not hosted the Conference of Parties. This is incorrect. India has hosted the Conference of Parties? When is it that India had hosted the Conference of Parties? Let me know. So overall, how many statements are correct? Here you will find B, that is 2 statements here given are correct. Very good. Divya, Aditi, correct. So find out, when is it that India had hosted the Conference of Parties as quickly as you can. Early 2000s is a very vague answer which sadly prelims won't accept. Now here, when we take a look at it, basically the Conference of Party presidency revolves between, or there's a rotation in 5 different UN regions. So Africa, Asia, Latin America and the Caribbean, Central and Eastern Europe, Western Europe and others. So it is in between these that generally a country offers that please hold the next Conference of Party in my country. Right? So they offer, they volunteer. That is when it is chosen. If it is not, there is no such volunteer, automatically it generally goes to the region of Western Europe itself. But it is not the case that the same region cannot hold the Conference of Parties twice. Now here, many of you had requested for a mind map for the conventions. So before we proceed into anything else and the next set of questions, a basic mind map that I will give you for the climate conventions and the climate actions. Use this, this will be helpful for you. So here, first of all, it all starts when? It all starts in 1972 by Stockholm Conference. Stockholm Conference is when it all starts. That is why it is referred to as the mother of all conferences. The Stockholm Conference 1972 was the conference on human rights and environment. Not exactly rights was said, but in the declaration, Stockholm Declaration, you had the aspect of apartheid, of colonialism. They were also talked about. So it was more about human justice. Then after that, you had various countries talking about environmental protection, environmental impact assessment developed with the passage of new law in the US and the adoption of environmental impact assessment. So environmental conservation started becoming very prominent. Then in 1987, there was a discussion around sustainability. And that is when the Brundtland report talked about sustainable development. Sustainable development. It was, in fact, before that, if you take a look at it, there were certain other changes. For example, in 1973, you had another convention. Which was that? You had Washington Convention, which we also refer to as CITES, which was adopted in 1975. Then in 1979, you had another convention, and that was the Convention on Migratory Species. Okay? Convention on Migratory Species, what is known as the Bonn Convention. So there were significant amount of activities which were already happening. In between this, you basically had in 1985 Vienna Convention. Vienna Convention for ozone layer. For ozone. Then again in 1987 itself, you had the Montreal Protocol, which was arrived at. Okay, for ozone depletion. That was followed by another major event which happened in 1988. In 1988, you had the formation of IPCC. IPCC was formed by which organizations? IPCC. So IPCC was basically formed by two organizations, World Meteorological Organization and United Nations Environment Program. Now, it was in 1990 and 91 where IPCC came up with the first assessment report. First assessment report. It highlighted significant amount of lacunae which existed in the form of the various different climate actions and how the world was warming. There was a scientific evidence and a scientific research which was done in the first assessment report. So globally, a lot of alarm was raised here. And as a result of that, till now, how many assessment reports have been released? 6 assessment reports have been released till now. That hue and cry which was created was followed by in 1992 by what was referred to as the Rio Summit or the Earth Summit. Now this was to commemorate 20 years of Stockholm. It was at this Rio Summit where you had 3 declarations and 3 conventions which were arrived at. Declarations included Agenda 21, Forest Principle, and so on. Conventions included Convention on Biological Diversity, Convention on Climate Change, and Convention to Combat Desertification. So here you had 3 declarations and 3 conventions. It was under this that you had declarations such as Agenda 21, which UPSC had asked already, and you had the Forest Principle, right? And then here you had 3 conventions. Which were the 3 conventions? Basically, UNFCCC, Convention on Biological Diversity, and UNCCD. Now UNFCCC has an annual conference of parties starting from 1995. Annual Conference of Parties. It was in the 3rd Conference of Party in 1997, 3rd COP, which was held in Kyoto. That is where you had the Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol. Then after that, you basically had the planned period to be carried out from 2008 to 2012, but then you had the Doha Amendment which extended it up till 2020. And what to happen and what should be done after 2020? For that, you basically had in 2015 Paris Agreement. Okay? Now, it was here that latest in 2023, we had Conference of Parties number 28 at Dubai. Then when we talk about conservation of biological diversity, it has got 2 protocols. Earlier one which was arrived at was the Cartagena Protocol. It is for living modified organisms protocol. And then the other one basically Nagoya Protocol. It is here within the Nagoya Protocol, and at that point of time where you had the development of HE biodiversity targets. HE targets. Okay. Now after that, here basically you had the further extension, and that is where in 2022 you had the Kunming-Montreal Agreement. Montreal Agreement, which we have discussed. Okay. In both the case of CBD and CCD, the Conference of Parties is held at a duration of 2 to 3 years. Now, this is the major convention. For all these three, the funding agency is Global Environment Facility. For all these three, that is the funding agency that you have. Now, this is the case of the representation here. Meanwhile, it was in 2016 that the Kigali Amendment also happened. Now, let us have a separate division here for what happened in case of national legislations. When we talk about national legislations. Now, national legislations were also initiated as a result of this Stockholm Conference, and India's action in Stockholm Conference, that is what led or gave the birth to these national legislations. So here, first of all, it was in 1972 that you had the passing of Wildlife Protection Act. Okay, for the conservation of wildlife. Now, here, why this came into existence, that also I'll tell you. But first of all, chronology is important. Then came the first act for prohibition and control of pollution. That was the Water Prevention of Pollution Act, 1974. It was under the provisions of this Water Act that Central Pollution Control Board was established as a result of this Water Act. So that is why CPCB is considered to be a statutory body, a statutory organization. This was then followed by 1980. In 1980, you had another important act legislation which was passed, and that was the Forest Conservation Act. Forest Conservation Act. It is this act of 1980 which was amended in 2023, due to which you hear so much about news about the aspect of those amendments. We had discussed the questions also about the Supreme Court having a kind of a directive given to the government also. So that is the 1980 Forest Conservation Act. This was followed in 1981 by the Air Prevention of Pollution Act. Under this provision, CPCB's, that is the Central Pollution Control Board's authority, was extended even to the monitoring of air pollution. And in fact, noise pollution, what act covers the legislation for and the provisions under noise pollution. So noise pollution is also covered under the Air Act. Okay, this is where you have the coverage of noise pollution as well. Then came an overarching act in 1986, and that was the Environment Protection Act. Environment Act 1986. And under this, the power of CPCB was further enhanced. Now the officials of CPCB, they could carry out seizures, searches, and they could cut the infrastructure, water supply, power supply for any of the industry which was not adhering to them, right, to adhering to the standard. So that is why the power of CPCB increased. The officials, if let's suppose they are ordering the shutting down of any industry, those officials were made immune to any action if their previous action has been as per the Environment Act. So this was to empower the officials also to carry out an independent action and mechanism. Then in 1988, another important landmark event happened, and that was basically the forest policy. It is as per this forest policy where India set for itself an aim to have 33% of the geographical area under forest cover. And then after that, another major legislation followed in 2002. That was the passing of Biodiversity Act. Biodiversity Act. This was in order to adhere to the principles of Convention on Biological Diversity, and these are your summarization of all the major acts, all the major conventions in a chronological order. Okay, if you understand this in terms of why this happened, when this happened, you won't need to ratify it. Okay, so you can always follow this by logic. So do use this flow chart. This flow, if you want, you can take a screenshot also. Do use this flow chart. This will be your easiest way to revise all the climate conventions, the various different fear that it is giving you. So this is an easiest way to revise for that. Okay, I hope this is going to be helpful. Now, when we talk about Convention on Biological Diversity, the Global Biodiversity Framework was set here itself. Okay, Global Biodiversity Framework was set here itself as a result of the Kunming-Montreal Agreement. This was the Global Biodiversity Framework which was set with a target of 2050. Okay, is that clear? Good. Now, why is it that all these national legislations immediately started following from the Stockholm Conference? Because it was in Stockholm Conference, and why all the conventions they started following? Before the Stockholm Conference also there was a convention, the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands in 1971. But after that, these were the major conventions which happened. Okay, so here, why is it that all these actions followed immediately after Stockholm? Because it was in Stockholm where three major threats were identified. It was in the case of the Stockholm Conference where three major threats were identified. What were the three threats? One was climate change, due to which you had climate actions. Another major was pollution. That is why you had countries passing legislations to control pollution. And another major portion of it was what? It was basically loss of biodiversity. Okay? That is why you had all the actions by the countries and at the international level also dominating and talking about these. Any doubts that any of us have, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, I hope this is a comprehensive understanding that you would have gained. Let this be an advantage, a competitive advantage that you gain over your competition as an easiest method of revision. Now, after that, we come to the next question. World's first melanistic tiger safari has recently been initiated in which of the protected area? Melanistic tiger safari has been initiated in which of the protected area? Indravati Tiger Reserve in the region of Chhattisgarh, Satkosia Tiger Reserve in the case of Odisha, Simlipal Tiger Reserve again in Odisha, Sundarbans Tiger Reserve in the region of West Bengal. So here good majority of you have given the correct answer, that is Simlipal Tiger Reserve is where a melanistic tiger safari has been initiated. Okay, so Simlipal, by the way, is a major area in terms of having a tiger reserve as well. It is also having an elephant reserve. So Simlipal is a region of very rich biodiversity. Okay, now there you have this in news that what are Odisha's famous black tigers and why is the state planning a safari around them. These are the melanistic tigers, where it is the secretion of melanin in the body which induces certain pigmentation and induces the coloration. It is in Simlipal where majority of the tigers, they have this tendency and this trait. Now there was research, there is still not immediate amount of research and detailed research which is carried out, but the initial findings indicate to us that these tigers, they have a genetic issue due to maybe inbreeding. Right, the propagation of genes from one population to another is not happening. They are inbreeding, and that is why you have these kind of variations. Okay, so melanism is a genetic condition with an increased production of melanin, right, pigment, a substance in the skin that produces hair, eye and skin pigmentation, resulting in black skin, feathers or hair in an animal. It is basically what induces the color variation in various, for example, when you study about population, you have the Caucasian population. When you talk about, let's suppose, the population of Southeast Asia example, there's a color difference. That is because of the melanin pigmentation. Now, Royal Bengal tigers of Simlipal belong to a unique lineage where you have higher than normal availability of and secretion of melanin, which gives them a blackish appearance. They are not entirely black, and hence they are known as pseudo-melanistic, right? If they would have been completely black, complete melanistic, but here you have pseudo, right? Now, as per 2022 cycle of All India Tiger Estimation, 16 individuals were recorded at Simlipal, out of which 10 of them were melanistic. Why are they turning out to be melanistic? Basically, because most of them are inbred, right? So the research is being carried out by the National Center of Biological Sciences, and that talks about the mutation of a single gene, that is transmembrane aminopeptidase Q, that causes black tiger stripes to enlarge and cover the larger proportion of the body. So this enzyme, this particular gene mutation, that needs to be taken a note of. Okay, I hope understood. Now then, moving on to the next question. Consider the following statements with reference to Attenborough's long-beaked echidnas. What are Attenborough's long-beaked echidnas? They have been in news. So they are considered as critically endangered by the IUCN. They are endemic to the Western Ghats in India. It is a mammalian species which reproduces by laying eggs. So which of these are correct? Think about it. I hope we are aware that what mammals and what is the difference between mammals and other species. Mammals, they bear their young ones, right? So, where are these Attenborough's long-beaked echidnas found? So, they are found in that Cyclops range in the area of Indonesia. Now, why the name Attenborough? It is named after the very famous naturalist, British naturalist, that is David Attenborough. You would have watched various documentaries having the narration of David Attenborough. So these echidnas, they belong to monotremes. a category of mammals who basically departed from the normal mammal evolution around 200 million years ago. So their development has happened separately. So example, if you have heard about the duck-billed platypus, right? Example, platypus. Now what they do, these are the mammalian species which lay their eggs. Okay, so here are they endemic to Western Ghats in India? Absolutely not. It is a mammalian species which reproduces by laying eggs? Yes, considered to be critically endangered. Correct answer is D, that is 1 and 3 only. So why it has been in news is because here you have the sighting of these Attenborough echidnas after 1960. These are the echidnas, and here you will observe the very long beak that they have. So that is basically the distinguishing factor, found only in the region of Indonesia, not found in the region of India, named after British naturalist David Attenborough. Okay, so here echidnas are nocturnal but shy, making them difficult to find, and long-beaked echidna has never been reported to be seen outside the Cyclops mountain of Indonesia's Papua region. Now they are basically unlike other mammals because they are monotremes. Monotremes means these are the mammals who lay their eggs as well. As per IUCN, it is critically endangered, and as per CITES, it is Appendix 2. Right? So this is basically about the echidnas. They have been mentioned quite a number of times in the current affairs for the past year. Always advisable. Do go through it. Do study it in detail. Now, a simpler question for a change. With reference to India's biodiversity, Eryx whitakeri, Western Ghats Bronzeback, Wall's Keelback and Boiga andamanensis are the species of primates, birds, reptiles or anthropods. So these are the species of what? Eryx whitakeri, Western Ghats Bronzeback, Wall's Keelback and Boiga andamanensis. Very good. Mammals don't lay eggs. Arvindan, mammals, they generally don't lay eggs. However, within the mammalian species, you have monotremes which basically departed from the mammalian evolution around 200 million years ago, and those are the categories of those mammals who continue to lay eggs as a departure from other mammals. See, evolution of species, they have happened from a common ancestor, isn't it? So one of those took a different path, the remaining of them followed a similar path. We are a part of that remaining portion, right? So the majority of the mammals that you will come across, they will never lay eggs. I hope that is understood. So here, good majority of you have given the correct answer. Yes, these are varieties of snakes. So basically, when you talk about whitakeri, these are the species of different boa, distinct relative of the red sand boa, for example, keelback, Boiga andamanensis. These are all the species of snakes and reptiles. Okay? Now, the next question, again very important. With reference to Mangrove Pitta, consider the following statements. It is a unique species of bird found only in the Nicobar Islands in India. Owing to a reducing population, they have been put under endangered category by the IUCN. It is considered as an indicator species. So which of the statements are relevant when it comes to the aspect of Mangrove Pitta here? So it is a unique species of bird in Nicobar. They have been put under endangered category, considered to be an indicator species here? So let me know. Read the statements carefully. Animesh, you can watch Attenborough series also, Our Planet series. That is basically, again, very insightful. So here you have to find out which of the statements are incorrect. So first is unique species of bird found in the Nicobar Islands of India. The word only is used. Incorrect. Right? Then, owing to reducing population, they have been put under endangered category. That is also incorrect. It is considered to be an indicator species about the health of the mangrove ecosystem. That is correct. It gives you an idea about the health of the ecosystem. So here the correct answer is going to be A. That is 1 and 2 only. So mangrove Pitta bird population rises in Odisha's Bhitarkanika. This is the Mangrove Pitta. Why it has been in news is there has been a census, a bird count which has been carried out. That is why it has been in news. Okay, and it is relevant. It has indicated that the population of the bird species has increased. It is an indicator species because it gives you an idea about the availability or the health of the entire mangrove ecosystem. Now, these species, they have a very strong beak. So, what they do is they generally will catch up the crustaceans in the area, for example the shell-bearing crabs for example, and they will hit them very hard upon any piece of rock, and that is what kills them, breaks their shell and allows them to feed. So that is a very unique practice that you will find here. So in a first ever census of Mangrove Pitta bird was carried out in 2 coastal regions of Odisha. It has been found out that their numbers have increased, 179 such birds. Now this measurement of census was carried out by visual methodology with the help of forest rangers and the forest guards moving through the forested areas with the help of the boats and identifying the bird signs and the bird calls. They are nearly threatened species found in pockets around Odisha's Bhitarkanika, West Bengal's Sundarbans, and it is suspected to be found in some other regions of the eastern coastal area as well. So that is the region where you will find the presence of these particular bird species. Overall, a comprehensive view if you take a look at it, so they will be consuming the range. First of all, it is the East Asian region along with the area in the eastern part of India, that is Myanmar, in the region of Indonesian, Malayan Peninsula, island areas, you will find the presence. So India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Myanmar, that is where you will find. Within India, Sundarbans, Bhitarkanika, parts of Andhra Pradesh are where you will have them, right? So habitat, forest and wetlands, crustaceans, insects and mollusks is the feed item. Now here the IUCN status, near threatened, right? And they have a specialty of the beak or the bill that they have. They use it to smash the crab and break their shells. Okay, so that is where they are amongst the 8 species of pittas that you find across the country. So females lay 2 to 4 eggs which hatch within the weeks, right? They are not scavengers, no. They basically hunt them down and consume them. Ishika, it's not possible to remember every species IUCN status. You don't have to remember every species IUCN status. No. Just the species which have been in news for the past year. Keep that in mind. Okay, differentiate that. That is why we have had these sessions. Otherwise, I could have simply given you the entire list that this is the species vulnerable, etc., etc. No. Once you know the backdrop, that where this species is found, then it becomes easier for you to decipher whether it will be critically endangered or not. right? So that is where you can always distinguish, differentiate, and generally vulnerable, endangered is where UPSC plays. UPSC has only asked this question once about critically endangered, but it is vulnerable and endangered where in the form of multi-statement question UPSC throws that puzzle at you. So try to keep that in mind. Okay? Now, then moving on to the next question. Consider the following statements about Eurasian Griffon vulture recently in news. Now, Eurasian Griffon, why it has been in news is because it has been sighted in the Aravali Biodiversity Park. That is why it has remained in news, and it has been sighted after a long period of time. So they are generally found across lakes and wetlands. They have been regarded as critically endangered by IUCN. Their range area extends from Portugal to India. See, if let's suppose you attend this question very passively, sitting there waiting for the answer, that this answer I will rectify, prelims also if they ask the question I will copy there, that is a wrong approach. Here try to apply your logic that as per your understanding which will be correct, whether it will be critically endangered or not. When you learn from that mistake, that is something which stays in the mind for a long period of time. So use that. So they are generally found across lakes and wetlands. They have been regarded as critically endangered. Their range area extends from Portugal to India. So first of all, generally not found across lakes and wetlands. Okay? They have been regarded as critically endangered? No. Their range area extends from Portugal to India? That is correct. So the correct answer here is going to be A. That is only one. Okay? Right? So here, this is why it has been in news, and vulture species, they have remained in news for some time owing to the threat that their population is facing due to various different drugs such as diclofenac, aceclofenac, and so on. That is why vulture species have always remained in news. So when we talk about the Eurasian Griffon, very large range from Middle East, North Africa and Europe, that is from Portugal all the way to the region of Spain, around Mediterranean countries is where they will be found, all the way to the east around India. Now they live in areas of mountains, plateaus, shrublands and grasslands which are arid, semi-arid. Sometimes they can go at a high mountain elevation also. But as you can see in harsher conditions also, cold, rain, etc. But they tend to avoid wetlands, marine waters, forests and lakes. Vulture species, how do you understand what will be their range? Vulture species, they feed on the dead ones, right? They are the scavengers of the nature. So when you have the vulture species living in a semi-arid area or in a kind of a, let's suppose, arid region, that is where they have a better availability, visibility of food as well. That is what they tend to prefer. Okay. Now, they have been facing a decline in population owing to the cattle, the dead animal, having poison in their body, having toxins in their body in the form of pesticides, chemicals. That is why in India and across the world also there has been movement where vulture restaurants are being opened up. Now all these vulture restaurants, they have one thing in common. What is the concept of vulture restaurant? Basically, there is a kind of a barricade which is built, a kind of a boundary wall system which is built, and the dead cattle, the dead animals in the region which do not have any intake of pesticides or any of the source or chemicals, those dead animals, they are kept in that enclosure. The vultures come there and feed on that. This helps in conservation of the vulture species. So that is where the vulture restaurants come into picture. Why this was in news again was because recently in the district of Kodarma in Jharkhand, you had the establishment of a vulture restaurant. Okay. Now, is it the first vulture restaurant that India has? Yes or no? Is it the first vulture restaurant that India has? The answer is no. The vulture restaurants in India, the initiation of it started around 2015 itself. Correct, Mohan. It started around 2015 itself, where you had the establishment of these vulture restaurants, which happened in Maharashtra. Punjab also took a step for the establishment of these kind of restaurants, and latest it is Jharkhand, where for the past couple of years the number of sightings of these vultures have been increasing consistently. Yes. Okay? Right. Now moving on to the next question. Which of the statements associated with Budget's frog is incorrect? They are endemic to the water bodies of South America. They dig burrows at the bottom of the water pools for the dry season. Designated as species of least concern by IUCN. They are amongst the few frog species which is diurnal in nature. So, which of them are incorrect? There are multiple restaurants, vulture restaurants. Yes, Gaurav, that is true. So, Budget's frog typically to be found in the region of South America. That is here correct. Why it was in news? It was in news because of the fact basically that they can block the enzymes of disease causing pathogens. You see, this frog, they are known as to be intelligent species of frogs. That is why they are also kept as pets, pet animals overall. And when you talk about these frogs, when they sense a danger, they puff up their lungs, right? And that is a normal defense mechanism produced by many of the species. Puffing up the lungs mean they try to increase their size. And then with a large shriek, they jump at the opponent and what they think is a predator. So that is their defense mechanism. But it has been found out that in their skin, you have certain chemicals which can block any infection. Because understand, whenever we talk about any new region getting inhabited, it is generally the frog, the amphibians which come to the region first. Later on to be followed by other species of reptiles, mammals, etc. Even at the time of Pangea, it was basically the amphibians, and even before that, the amphibians who started dominating the lands initially. Then later on came the reptiles, and then later on came the mammals in the evolutionary cycle. So Budget's frog has got that kind of an ability which can break the enzymes of the pathogens which cause disease. Because understand, whenever you have any pathogen, they will induce certain chemicals in your body which will break down the immune response system. When that immune response system is broken, that is when you get infected. Right? So those chemicals are broken down by the findings of the Budget's frog. So found in South America and kept as a pet in many countries because of their intelligent behavior. The frog secreted peptide inhibited two key enzymes which are subtilisin Carlsberg and proteinase K. Now both of them are produced by pathogens. So both of these enzymes, they are inhibited by the peptide released by the frog. So IUCN status is endangered for these frog species. So majority of you have given the correct answer. The correct answer in this case would be C. Okay? Here let me mark it out. The correct answer would be C. Okay? Good. Now, after that, moving on to the next question. With reference to the recently held Pakkepaga Hornbill Festival, consider the following statements. The aim was to recognize the role played by the Mishmi tribe in conserving hornbills in the Pakhe Tiger Reserve or the Pakhui Tiger Reserve. The first such event in Arunachal was celebrated in 2023 owing to the success of Hornbill festivals of Nagaland. Which of the above statements is or are correct? Here basically the Pakhe Paga Hornbill festival is being celebrated in Arunachal, right? And that is owing to generally what you observe in the case of Nagaland. Hornbills, they are revered in Nagaland, they are revered in Kerala as well. Hornbill in general are found across two biodiversity hotspots in India. One is the Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspot and the other one is the Western Ghats biodiversity hotspot. So here, the first question. The aim was to recognize the role played by the Mishmi tribe in conserving hornbills in the Pakhe Tiger Reserve. Incorrect. It is basically to be carried out by the Nishi tribe. See, when we talk about the Nishi tribe, traditionally they had always hunted these hornbills, and they had hunted the hornbills to get to make their headgear and to come up with various other productions. It was only recently that they understood, that is not recently as in last year, but only in recent times they have started revering hornbill, they have started protecting hornbill, because hornbill, they are also known as the natural gardeners of the forested ecosystem. Why? Because these hornbills, they consume the seeds. Now, many of the times in their overlarge and overgrown beaks, they will trap the seed and they will fly away distances. In that manner, sometimes the seeds will drop somewhere and there will be propagation and germination of a new plant species there. So that is why they help in a general gene carrying and the gene spread of the various different types of trees, maintaining a healthy population. Then the first such event was held? No. It was the 9th Hornbill Festival being held in Arunachal. It was declared as a state festival by the previous Chief Minister itself. So which of them are correct? The answer is D. That is neither 1 nor 2. Okay? Pakhe Tiger Reserve is where? It is in Arunachal. So Pakhe Paga Hornbill Festival begins in Arunachal. Effective conservation of iconic birds have been urged. Overall, when you take a look at hornbill, so it is the state bird of both Arunachal and the region of Kerala. They are referred to as forest engineers or farmers of the forest for playing a key role in dispersal of the seeds from one region to another. So they indicate the prosperity and balance of the forest. Now it is evaluated as vulnerable. You have many species of hornbill which are present and they are hunted for their casques, that is this upper beak. That is why they are hunted, and that is used as a kind of a trophy which you can have on the headgear that is being worn by the tribal people in those areas. That is why for the past few years there is development of glass fiber and artificial fiber which can be having a similar appearance as these kind of headgear. They are also posed for their meat and medicinal value of their body parts. So you also had Malabar pied hornbill which was in news, because Malabar pied hornbill, that was named Hori, has been declared as the mascot of the Pench Tiger Reserve in the region of Maharashtra. That is why it was in news. So India is home to 9 species of hornbills: Great Hornbill, Malabar pied hornbill, Malabar grey hornbill and Indian grey hornbill. All of these are found in the Western Ghats. It is Malabar grey hornbill which has been put under endangered category owing to their declining population. So here population is reducing. Population is reducing. Has been put by the IUCN under endangered category. Okay? There's not enough research which is being carried out. Now, generally you will observe that in the region of Annamalai, Parambiculam and Vayachal region, in the area of the Western Ghats, that is where you will have a great confluence, a larger concentration and congregation of these hornbills in general, right? So what they are known for, their unique practice is their mid-air aerobatics, which causes for the casque butting. It can lead to the breaking of the beaks as well, and that is for the mating season. That is the males who fight and the beaks get broken, and that is for the mating season. The winner gets to woo the female by presenting delicious fruit. So this is a very unique characteristic. Why I am telling you this detail? In order to prepare you for a paragraph kind of a question. You have a paragraph kind of a question that this bird indulges in these activities and presents this. So which bird is being talked about? Hornbill is in significant amount of news, so be expectant for that. During the breeding season, that is also unique, that the female, they basically prepare a nest high up across the tree, generally overlooking a valley, right? Overlooking the valley, so that they feel safe. That is why hornbill nests, they are not easy to procure. They will have their nest at very tall trees, right, for greater view as well. And the females, they lock themselves up within the nest. With the help of a mate, seals the entrance using the droppings and stay there for the month. And it is only through the cavity where they consume food, but otherwise they stay inside. And the chick hatches out of the egg. She only leaves a small vertical slit open through which the male provides food. Okay? See, if the beaks break, in that case, the problem is that they are unable to hold that seed anymore. That is what can lead to the ultimate death. They are unable to grab the fruits anymore. That is why they have a great requirement of their beaks, right? I hope that is understood. Now, consider the following statement about Nilgiri Tahr. Project Nilgiri Tahr is a 10-year program to understand the habitat and threats posed to Nilgiri Tahr. It is endemic to the Eastern Ghats near Tamil Nadu. They are the only surviving species of ungulates population in India. How many of the above statements is or are correct? We had talked about the fact that Nilgiri Tahr population is facing the danger due to one of the invasive alien species in the area. And that is what? It is eucalyptus. Right? Eucalyptus is basically reducing the size of the shola vegetation, and it is a shola vegetation which is a natural habitat for the Nilgiri Tahr. So Project Nilgiri Tahr, is it a 10-year program? No. It is endemic to the Eastern Ghats in the region of Tamil Nadu? No. Where do you find them? Basically, in the region of Western Ghats, in the region of Nilgiris. Then they are the only surviving species of ungulate population in India? No. Across the northern area, you have many of the ungulate population. It is one of the only surviving population of mountain ungulates in the southern part of India. In the northern part, you have many species of ibex, etc., which belong to this category. So here, this is also incorrect. So the correct answer is D. That is none of the above. I hope you have got it correct. 9% of you got it correct. So good. Arvindan, Project Nilgiri Tahr is a 5-year project. It is not Thar, it is Tahr. So please understand. It is the state animal of Tamil Nadu. It cannot be the national animal of Tamil Nadu, right? So I hope we understand that difference. So what is the Project Nilgiri Tahr? It is Tamil Nadu's multi-pronged initiative to save this animal. So a research for the habitat. Where is it that they are facing that habitat loss? That is about to be studied. So basically, the initiative is being carried out by whom? Wildlife Institute of India, World Wildlife Fund, Tamil Nadu Veterinary Animal Sciences University, and IUCN. These are the major organizations and bodies which are involved. They are endangered species as per IUCN, and it generally inhabits the grasslands at a particular elevation. So they have a presence in the shola vegetation. Shola vegetation. No, black buck is different from Nilgiri Tahr vegetation. Okay, so that is basically in this shola vegetation, the amount of grasses that you have, that is reducing. Why it is reducing? Because of spread of invasive alien species, because of encroachment, deforestation, etc. So that is why their habitat is shrinking, their habitat is fragmenting. That is why they need a greater conservation. So the initiative aims, the project Nilgiri Tahr, overall if you talk about this initiative, what is the aim? So multiple and multi-pronged approach to provide conservation, conducting a biannual synchronized survey to estimate the species population. So the population count which will be done will not be annual, it will be biennial, means every 2 years, right? Then here, however, it is biannual, means twice. Radio collaring to understand the movement pattern, reintroduction of the species to historical habitats, diagnosis and treatment for the lump disease, which is also killing a lot of these Nilgiri Tahr. Ungulates grassland restoration in the upper Bhavani region. Bhavani is a tributary of which particular river? When you hear about the term Bhavani, it is a tributary of which particular river? Are we aware? No. It is river Kaveri. Very good, Gaurav. So here biannual, let me tell you, biannual means every 6 months. Biennial means every 2 years. Okay? Biennial means every 2 years. Okay, that is the difference. I hope there is no confusion which is created. This is basically, Bhavani is a tributary of Kaveri. So these are the various initiatives under Project Nilgiri Tahr. Okay? Ungulates basically are the species of those high altitude species of the biodiversity which have a particular knack of climbing these mountains. Generally, they create a kind of a vacuum cup in their feet. These are the herbivore species which you will find in the region of the Himalayas also. Various ibexes also, they are also into the category of ungulates. Yes. Now, coming to the next question. Which of the following are biodiversity heritage sites of India? Hogrekan, Shistura, Hiranyakashe, Majuli Island and Patalkot. Which of these are the biodiversity heritage sites in India? Radio collaring is used. Radio collar is just to understand what is the path that the species have taken. What is the route that they are following? For example, for understanding the tiger population, its habitat, its feeding habits, many of the tigers were put with a radio collar. It was across these radio collars that one particular tiger which was tracked in Maharashtra, it was found that the adult male tiger had basically traveled for 3,000 kilometers in order to find its habitat. So that gave an idea about the size of area, land which is required by the tigers on their own. So that is where it becomes helpful. Okay, that is why you put the radio collar. Understood? Yes, like a GPS for the wild. Right? So here, biodiversity heritage sites. What are these? These are your unique areas having natural diversity in terms of some unique characteristic of species, maybe medicinal plants, maybe a keystone species in that area, right? So those are biodiversity heritage sites. So Hogrekan, where is Hogrekan? Hogrekan is near Chikmagalur in Karnataka. It is a biodiversity heritage site. It again has got significant shola vegetation, right? And it provides connectivity to the Kudremukh Wildlife Sanctuary. It is a kind of a wildlife corridor also. That is why conservation under biodiversity heritage. Now, the conservation as biodiversity heritage site will be provided under which law? Under which statute? It is basically provided under the provisions of Section 37 of Biodiversity Act 2002. National parks and wildlife sanctuaries have the validation from which act? From Wildlife Protection Act. Okay, all the other protected areas, Wildlife Protection Act. Okay, now then Shistura Hiranyakeshi, it is present in where? In the Sindhudurg region of Maharashtra, and that is where a unique species of fish was found near the temple pond. That is why it required conservation and declaration as biodiversity heritage. Then Majuli Island, it is the largest riverine island across the world, created by river Brahmaputra by siltation within the river channel. So that is where Majuli Island again requires conservation. Patalkot, where is Patalkot? So that is also a biodiversity heritage site. Overall, you will observe that all these four, they are the biodiversity heritage site. Yes, Patalkot is present in MP. Very good. Now, just briefly, I want you to understand what is the criteria. What is a biodiversity heritage site? So, they are the areas having unique, ecologically fragile ecosystem of very, very rich biodiversity. So there will be species richness, high endemism, presence of rare, endemic and threatened species, keystone species, species of evolutionary significance, the wild ancestors and relatives of the domesticated species, preeminence of biological components having cultural and aesthetic value. Can it have man-made areas also? The answer is yes. For example, the first biodiversity heritage site in India. What was the first biodiversity heritage site in India? It was basically the Nallur Tamarind Grove. Very good. Tamarind Grove. That is where you had the, where is it? Near Bengaluru in Karnataka. So that is where you had the first biodiversity heritage site. Okay, here you will find in this, while you have significant thicket of groves, mangrove, but also you will find the significant amount of Chola architecture. Older buildings, older temple architecture representing the Chola architecture. So that is present in Nallur Tamarind Grove. So you can have, for example, when we talk about the Shistura Hiranyakeshi, now that is again a region around a temple premise. A region around the temple premise where the pond of that temple has got a unique species of fish present there. That is why it is relevant. Okay. Now the criteria for declaration: areas that contain a mosaic of natural, semi-natural and man-made habitats. Here, majority of you will commit mistake if an option is stated that only natural sites are important or are regarded as biodiversity heritage. No, man-made sites also. They together contain a significant diversity of life form. Areas that contain significant domesticated biodiversity component or agro-ecosystem. Areas that are significant from a biodiversity, also important from cultural spaces, sacred groves or trees, right, like the Nallur Tamarind Grove. Then areas including the small ones, wildlife corridors like the Hogrekan. It is a very important wildlife corridor. Areas that provide habitat for aquatic terrestrial species. Areas that are maintained as preservation plots for the research wing of forest, and medicinal plant conservation areas. Now, how do you declare a region as who declares a region as a biodiversity heritage site? So here, first of all, suggestion is provided by the Biodiversity Management Committee. So as per the Biodiversity Act 2002, you have a 3-tiered arrangement of the Biodiversity Committee, right? So at the national level, you have the National Biodiversity Authority. At the state level, State Biodiversity Authority. And at the district level, you have the BMCs or the Biodiversity Management Committees. So this is at the district level. Okay. So when you have this at the district level, so what they do is they provide that recommendation to the state biodiversity boards. Okay, and after that, the state biodiversity boards can declare a region as a biodiversity heritage site. Okay, I hope that is understood. Now coming to biosphere reserve. Arrange the following biosphere reserves from north to south. Dehang Debang Biosphere Reserve, Kanchenjunga Biosphere Reserve, and Manas Biosphere Reserve. Arrange them from north to south. So here Dehang Debang is present where? It is present in Arunachal. So here, if you go for the orderly arrangement, which is the northernmost out of these three, it is easy, right? Is that why majority of you are giving the incorrect answer? If it is easy. So, the northernmost is going to be Dehang Debang Biosphere Reserve. Then will come Kanchenjunga Biosphere Reserve. And the third will be the Manas Biosphere Reserve. So, the correct answer is going to be B. That is 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so when we talk about biosphere reserves across the country, so here majority of you have given the incorrect answer. So here, if you take a look at the biosphere reserves across the country, Dehang Debang is situated here. Okay, then comes Kanchenjunga, then comes Manas. Right, overall across the country you have 18 biosphere reserves. 18 different biosphere reserves. You can keep in mind these number of reserves. This is a small number, so you can go for understanding of this. This is not something which is going to be very arduous, right? So what are biosphere reserves? International designation given by UNESCO. UNESCO is the important organization when it comes to biosphere reserves. So representative parts of natural and cultural landscapes extending over large areas of terrestrial, coastal marine ecosystem, or a combination of both of them. So that is basically the biosphere reserve. Very good. If you have made a chart of the reserves and the rivers, very good. But generally you will have multiple rivers draining through a biosphere reserve. So just ensure that all the major rivers are considered. Otherwise, it can lead to a negative marking that easily as well. Now, what is the criteria for a region to be declared as a biosphere reserve? So first, the site must contain protected and minimally disturbed core area of value of natural conservation. Core area must be biogeographical unit and large enough to sustain a viable population representing all trophic levels. Involvement of the local communities and areas potential for preservation of natural way of life also. See, it was in the 1970s itself, around 1970 to the period of 1972, when UNESCO came up with the idea of conservation through the help of the local people. Because at that point of time, the debate largely which was present was that if you have to protect an area, remove the people from that region. Let nature be on its own. But then it was realized that this is not sustainable. If you remove and if you oust the people from that area, then that means what? They have lived in that area for generations, hundreds and thousands of years. They will always want to live in the same region. So if authorities are deliberately removing them, you are in a way disenfranchising them, uprooting them. So not only will they want to come back, they will have an incentive to curtail or cross over your conservation measure also. That is why you had multiple examples already in the world across Asia, across Africa. For example, in the Gir region, you have the Maldhari tribe. Maldhari tribe has co-lived with the lions for a long period of time. And the latest finding by IUCN and the latest report which has indicated that lions in India are almost 3 times safer as compared to the lions in Africa is again a validation of the same point. That the Maldhari tribe have coexisted. They know how to live with the lions. So that is where UNESCO came up with the idea about man and biosphere. And the entire concept of biosphere reserve can include multiple protected areas within them, but there should be significant space for, let's suppose, carrying out research activities. Now, what research activities? For example, what are the alternate food sources that an animal depends on? What is the concept of the food web in that entire area? So the biosphere reserve, which is very large in itself, has got 3 different zones. You have what is known as the core zone, you have the buffer zone, and then you also have the transition zone. Okay. So that is where you have different type of zonation which is present. And that different type of zonation involves different types of activities. Core zone, no activity is allowed. Buffer zone, activities which are sustainable in nature. Sustainable, let's suppose, agriculture, collection of forest forages. These are sustainable. No use of pesticides, insecticides, etc. ideally should be done. Transition zone is where you have the human habitations, etc., which you will find in this area also. Okay, so this is basically the delineation of the entire biosphere reserve. Not all the protected areas have the similar case. In the case of tiger reserve, for example, you just have the core zone and the buffer zone. It is in the biosphere reserve because they are very large. You have this kind of classification. Now, another question which can be framed from here. Consider the following statements about biosphere reserves in India. Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve is the oldest biosphere reserve in India in terms of notification issued. Coal Desert Biosphere Reserve is the largest biosphere reserve in India in terms of area. Which of the above statements is incorrect? Think about it. See, by these questions, you will cover the entirety of biosphere reserve, right? You won't have many of the areas left. So here, the first statement, if we analyze, Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, is it the oldest biosphere reserve in India? in terms of the notification issued? Yes. It was declared as a biosphere reserve around 1986 itself. So it is the oldest one. So that is correct. Cold Desert Biosphere Reserve is the largest biosphere reserve? No. Which is the largest biosphere reserve? It is the Run of Kutch. Okay? So the answer is B2 only. Which is the smallest biosphere reserve across the country? I'm sure many of us would be aware of that also. The smallest biosphere reserve in the country. So think about it. Run of Kutch is the largest. Yes, very good. It is the Dibru-Saikova. Dibru-Saikova Biosphere Reserve. Good. Arvindan, Kavi, very good. So here majority of you have given the incorrect answer. So Run of Kutch is the largest, then followed by Sundarbans, then at the minimum we'll have the case of Dibru-Saikova. Now Man and Biosphere Program was launched by whom? By UNESCO. Now, the entire gist, don't go into the details of it, not required. Just understand in one sense, what is the Man and Biosphere Reserve Program? The kind of a conservation strategy where the local population is made a stakeholder, is made a participant in the conservation process. That's it. And where enough space is available in the protected area to carry out research and development. That's it. Keep that in mind. So out of the various different biosphere reserves that you have, few of them have been accorded as the status as under MAB program, Man and Biosphere Program. The first biosphere reserve which was provided with this accreditation was actually the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve in 1986 itself was provided that accreditation of Man and Biosphere Program. In total, 12 biosphere reserves in India have been provided that recognition. So Nilgiri, Gulf of Mannar, then Sundarban, Nanda Devi, Nokrek, Panchmari. The latest is Panna. Right. Before that, it was Kanchenjunga, Kanchenjunga was provided that accreditation around 3 years back. And then you have the latest one, that is Panna. That has been added to the Man and Biosphere Program. Okay? Research is allowed. In fact, Vamsi, the entire aspect of Biosphere Reserve. Why do we need Biosphere Reserve? If you have National Park, if you have Wildlife Sanctuary, then why do you need Biosphere Reserve? For example, when you think about the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, this forms a passage between Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats. But in that entire Nilgiri region, the entire Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, you have Mudumalai Tiger Reserve, you have Nagarhole Tiger Reserve, you have Bandipur Tiger Reserve, you have Mukurthi Wildlife. So you have many of the protected areas. The Nugu Wildlife Sanctuary, all of them are situated there. So why do we declare the entire region as a Biosphere Reserve then? The declaration is done so that in that larger space, there is a scope for research and development activity which can be done. Okay? Understood? Now, next, coming to the next question. Consider the following statements with reference to the Global Cooling Watch Report 2023. Presently, the cooling equipments account for 1/3 of the total electricity consumption and is expected to cross 50% by the year 2050. Passive cooling has been found to be the most energy-consuming avenue in the cooling sector. The report has been released by Global Cool Cities Alliance. How many of the above statements is or are correct? Think about it. How many of them are correct? Okay. So first of all, the cooling equipments account for 1/3 of the total electricity? No, it is much lesser than that. Presently, they amount to somewhere around 18 to 20%. That is 1/6 to 1/5. It is a bit of a data-oriented statement. That is what prepares you for UPSC after all, isn't it? First statement is incorrect. Then, passive cooling has been found to be the most energy-consuming avenue in the cooling sector. What is passive cooling? Passive cooling is that you develop the architecture in such a way that rather than having those air conditions, fans, etc. working round the clock, you have natural ventilation, natural flow of air, providing you cooling without the usage of electricity. That is passive cooling, with the help of what are the structures that you use for the construction of the buildings. For example, you would have come across the news stories that few people are constructing the modern houses with mud structures, mud bricks. Why? In order to induce a natural cooling. So that is passive cooling. So has been found to be the energy consuming avenue? Incorrect. Then, the report has been released by Global Cool Cities Alliance. Incorrect. So, the correct answer in this is D. That is none of the above. So, let me see how many of you have given the correct answer. 5% of you have given the correct answer. Okay? It is not energy consuming. Passive cooling does not consume energy. Okay, so here understand what to extract and how to extract from this. So basically this report was released by the UNEP led Cool Coalition that has basically released the Global Cooling Watch report. These kind of statement, guys, this kind of a statement like question UPSC, you pick up any of the previous year question, you will find UPSC framing these questions. This is what I want you to train yourself in terms of the language. Catch it by the language. You read every statement, every word carefully. And that is why these marathon sessions are also a test of your concentration. For the first 15 minutes, even in your prelims examination, 30 minutes, you will have maximum concentration. It is after that that you start committing mistakes. So please get habituated for that. So it is a comprehensive analysis of the cooling sector and focuses not only on the space cooling, but also cooling for the food cold storage and the cold chains and the healthcare sector. That is also where refrigeration is used for storage of medicines, vaccines, food delivery, etc. So there also there is energy which is consumed. So there are three important measures for sustainable cooling. One is passive cooling, we have talked about, by flow of air, by better energy efficient materials being used for construction, higher energy efficiency standards, and faster phase down of climate warming HFC refrigerants, which is already happening. So these three will lead to sustainable cooling. All the combination of these measures could lead to 60% cutoff in terms of the warming that is caused by the cooling sector. Okay? Now, the next question. With reference to the recently released Adaptation Gap Report 2023, consider the following statements. The past decade has seen a continuous increase in the number of new adaptation projects funded through the UNFCCC climate funds. It is a biennial report released by UNEP. So these are the statements for the Adaptation Gap Report. So which of these statements is or are correct? We will discuss around 8 to 9 more of the questions. It is up till 10:30 that we will discuss. But please make yourselves much more adaptable to these statements and these kind of puzzles there. Okay? So here, the past decade has seen a continuous increase in the number of new adaptation projects. That in itself is a red flag. When it comes to climate fund, in the past decade, remember, The past decade has had years of COVID pandemic. Apply your logic. So how can it be possible that during the COVID pandemic and after the COVID pandemic, all the countries who were cutting short their financial expenditure, many of them went into recession, including the developed economies? How is it that they can continue to give the funding? Right? So that is the logic I want you to apply. First statement is incorrect. It is a biennial report. No, it is an annual report. So which of these statements are correct? D. Neither one nor two. None of them are correct here. Let me see how many of you have given the correct answer. I hope we have a significant majority. So basically, Adaptation Gap report released by UNEP indicates what? What is adaptation gap, by the way? What do we mean by this adaptation gap report? It indicates to you that, for example, for mitigating the impact of climate change or adapting to climate change, if let's suppose these many actions are required, right? And presently a country is taking these many actions. So that is the adaptation gap in simplest of terms. Okay, for example, you need to have a separate organization, a separate body for research activities or for rescue activities, for research activities and so on. You have not done that. For coastal resilience, etc., you have not done that. So you are not able to adapt. For example, there's a sea level rise in the coastal area, so you need to build embankments. You have not done that. So that is why you need basically, that is the adaptation to climate change, right? So they need at least $215 billion every year to carry out meaningful adaptation work. And out of that, this is the requirement, guys. Okay, $215 billion is the requirement. Only $21 billion went to the developing countries. So that is where there's a huge adaptation gap. And observe the number of new projects funded through the climate funds, UNFCCC climate funds. There has been a secular decline. Initially, it was increasing, but then there has been a decline. Now, this is from 2016 onwards, where you had countries like US and US-led institutions backing out of climate finance due to the presidency of Donald Trump, and then followed by the COVID years. And then again in 2022, many of the countries went into recession. Okay? Right? Now, then after that, observe this. Basically, this is the adaptation financing need, what is required, and the international finance flow, that is what is being given. So this is the adaptation gap that you can generate. So that is what adaptation gap report, emission gap report released every year. Okay, keep that in mind. Now, what has been suggested by UNEP is a 7-step procedure in order to combat that adaptation gap. First is international public adaptation finance, then domestic expenditure in the own country. Every country is responsible for their own expenditure for adaptation. Private sector finance, increase in finance for SMEs, the remittances provided, reform of global financial architecture, for example, the Bretton Woods Institute, for example, the GCF, the GEF, they need to provide more active funding, implementation of the Paris Agreement as well. So that is where these approaches, but these 3 major approaches are required to fulfill the adaptation gap. Okay? Right? Now, next question, a simple one. Sand and dust storms is a report released by United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, World Meteorological Organization, United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Which of them have released the sand and dust storm. See, okay, it has been discussed. So what is the answer? Okay. So I have a major confusion amongst the candidates between A and C. Right? So this is basically right. Now, when we talk about the sand and dust storm, while it does come into the purview of the UNCCD, there has been a detailed report released by FAO as well. Okay, Food and Agriculture Organization, that has also come out with the sand and dust storm report here. So that is basically, it won't be WMO. WMO is basically to confuse you guys. So while it has, the FAO has used that and then has been used by UNCCD. It talks about the sand and dust storms in increased amount, how they are impacting the dietary patterns, how they are impacting the availability of food items, food security is being hampered. That is the basic aspect here. Okay, understood? Or is there any doubt here? It has been talked about the fact that these sand and dust storms, while they are very common in the semi-arid areas, it is largely a resultant of significant amount of deforestation, encroachment in that particular area also. So because of that, there has been, for example, in any particular region, and here the region in India, particularly Aravallis, becomes important because Aravallis are the last standing barrier when it comes to the greenery to the east and the desert to the west. So in the desert area, already the wind speed is very high. So when the wind speed is high, it is able to generate these storms, and then it can lead to desertification and the spread of the desert areas also. Okay, and once that happens, then in those newer areas the food productivity starts to reduce. Okay, so basically that is where the productivity starts to reduce, and it will lead to significant food scarcity. And what can be done? You can have green wall initiatives. For example, the Aravalli Green Wall Initiative. Aravallis are the large standing patches of these green cover. Similar green wall initiative is being launched in Africa also, particularly in the Sahel region of Africa, where the prevention of that spread of the desert dust from the Sahara to the southern part, that is where the African Union is pitching in to have that green wall. It is to prevent that desertification. Desertification overall, for your prelims, two things are relevant for desertification. Keep that in mind. What is desertification? One is the expansion of the existing desert in the peripheral areas. That was a long understood concept of desertification. That whatever the existing desert is, if by wind erosion the sand is spreading into the nearby region, that is desertification. Like for example, if let's suppose from the Thar desert you have the sand which is blown over into the western portion of Madhya Pradesh, that region turns out to be a desert. It is an expansion of desert, desertification. But in the Conference of Parties on 2020, which was for UNCCD, which was held in India, in Noida, in the month of September, in that Conference of Party, land degradation has been cited, has been accepted as another avenue which can lead to desertification. So there are two methods of desertification: expansion into the peripheral areas and degradation leading to desertification. Okay? And which is the funding agency for UNCCD? The funding agency for UNCCD is basically the Global Environment Facility. Keep that in mind. Very good. You should not forget that. Then, with reference to Plastic Overshoot Day, consider the following statements. It is calculated based upon the calculation of Managed Waste Index of a country. Amongst the BRICS nation, South Africa is estimated to hit the overshoot earliest in 2024. Which of the above statements is or are correct? What is this Plastic Overshoot Day? That was in news. This overshoot day represents that condition where, let's suppose, a country like India is generating X amount or 100 units, okay, of waste. Let's suppose it has the capability to digest, or it has the capability to treat, let's suppose, only 10 units of waste. Capability of processing is only 10 units. It has generated 100. It generally generates 100 units. So the moment that India will generate these 10 units, after that, whatever waste is generated, we cannot handle that. So that is our overshoot. So if in an year we basically generate, let's suppose, 120 units, every month we generate 10 units of waste, means after the month of January only we have hit our capacity. After that it is overshoot. Okay. So here it is calculated based upon the calculation of Managed Waste Index of a country. Majority of you have given this as the correct answer. This is incorrect. It is basically calculated on the basis of Mismanaged Waste Index. What is it that a country cannot manage? Okay, I hope you will never forget this difference between managed and mismanaged. Amongst the BRICS nations, South Africa is estimated to hit the overshoot earliest into 2024. Incorrect. Which is the country amongst the BRICS which will hit it the earliest? It is going to be India. Right? So which of the above statements is or are correct? The answer is D. That is none of them. So I hope few of you have given the correct answer. 19% of you have given the correct answer. Good. So this is the overshoot day calendar across the world, where you will observe that amongst the BRICS nation, and this is something you can keep in mind. So India has already reached that overshoot in April itself. That means the amount of waste that we can process, that much amount of waste we have generated by 23rd of April itself. Then if you observe, South Africa will reach there on 9th of June. Then after that, if you consider the region of China, right, September 29, Russian Federation, April 27, right? So that is where amongst the BRICS region, if you observe Brazil, it is August 11. So amongst the BRICS nation, India has hit that already in terms of overshoot. Now, the next question. Consider the following statements about wetland city accreditation recently in news. It is a voluntary accreditation system established by the Ramsar Convention at COP14 for safeguarding the urban wetlands. India has nominated the cities of Indore, Bhopal and Udaipur for this accreditation. The accreditation needs to be renewed at each Conference of Parties meeting for the Ramsar Convention. How many of the above statements is or are incorrect here? There is no question on the screen. Okay, I hope now the question is available. Right? Good. Question is not visible? It is visible. Good. So again, take a look at it. Consider the following statements about the wetland city accreditation recently in news. It is a voluntary accreditation system established by the Ramsar Convention at COP14 for safeguarding the urban wetlands. India has nominated the cities of Indore, Bhopal and Udaipur. The accreditation needs to be renewed at each COP meeting to the convention. Which of this how many of the above statements is or are incorrect? So the first statement, voluntary accreditation system established in 2022? No. It was established in COP12 of Ramsar Convention, which was held in Uruguay. There only it was established. India has nominated the cities of Indore, Bhopal and Udaipur for the accreditation. Yes, the accreditation needs to be renewed at each conference of parties meeting to the convention. No, the accreditation holds true for around 6-year time. So here, how many of the above statements is or are incorrect? The answer is B. That is, 2 of them are incorrect. Good to see that majority of you have given the correct answer here. So basically, established at Conference of Parties 2015, which happened in region of Uruguay. It is valid for 6 years. Now, why these cities have been recommended by India? So they are, see, the urban wetland city. Wetland city accreditation means what? The urban wetland areas need to be conserved significantly. And in those urban areas, you need to have maintenance of the lakes, the aquifers need to be recharged, pollution needs to be controlled. Only then accreditation is provided. So Udaipur city in itself has got many of the wetlands, Pichola, Fateh Sagar, Rang Sagar, Swarup Sagar, Dutalai. There are many of the lakes in the region of Udaipur. Sirpur Lake, a Ramsar site, is already present in Indore, and Bhoj wetland around Bhopal. So all of these cities, they fit the bill for that accreditation. India has submitted that list. Okay? Now, the Arctic Report Card 2023 has been published by United Nations Environment Programme, International Cryosphere Climate Initiative, World Meteorological Organization, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. So, which has released the Arctic Report Card 2023? It is a detailed study about the aspect of the Arctic region, the melting ice around the region of Arctic. So here, the correct answer is NOAA, D. That is National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which carries out this detailed study basically across the oceans, the oceanic circulations, and in its study, it has basically found out, the study was carried out to understand the area of the Arctic, the land areas around the Arctic, the permafrost, how the permafrost is melting or not, and how the meridional overturning circulation, how that is getting impacted in the region of the Atlantic Ocean also. So that was the detailed study which was carried out. It was found out that the marine algae, the algal population is increasing. Okay, and there is a significant snow loss in the surrounding land area, extreme wet precipitation, particularly in the Scandinavian nations, greening of the region of Alaska and northern Canada. Remember, yesterday we talked about that as a climate tipping point. So that is already happening. Warm ocean water in the region of Barents Sea. If you recall yesterday's session, Barents Sea was also, ice loss in the Barents Sea was also a climate tipping point. Means all these have the potential to induce an exponential level of climate change beyond the control of any measure anymore, right? Then near record melt, unprecedented wildfire, and in the region of the Yukon River. Yukon River is where? When you take a look at it, in the region of Alaska and northern Canada, around Brooks Range, that is where already the upward migration, the northward migration of salmon is happening, which tells you that now they are much more comfortable closer to the region of the Arctic. And all this report indicates that by the year 2040, we will experience an ice-free Arctic at least once during the summer season. Okay? Now, After this, the next question. So now these are a bit of a factual questions, so you can get this correct. This is a question associated with ecosystems, right? So apply your logic, get this correct. These are low-hanging fruits. Consider the following statements about mudflats. They do not exhibit the edge effect of species. They protect the coastal areas from erosion. They can support simple life forms like polychaetes, but crustacean species cannot survive within them. They support the migratory species of birds across various flyways. How many of the above statements is or are correct? So, very good, guys. So here they do not exhibit the edge effect of species. Incorrect. Why? What is edge effect? Edge effect is observed in the region of ecotones. Basically, the transition between two different ecosystems. So in this transition between the ecosystems, population of species will generally be higher. Why? Because here you will have species which can adapt to ecosystem A also. You will have species which can adapt to ecosystem B also. So that is where, because of greater adaptability, you will have more number of species always. What are mudflats? Mudflats are generally the transition area between the aquatic and the terrestrial regions. Right? So there you will find small worms also in large numbers underneath the sand. That is what is the polychaetes. There you will find some of the lobsters, shrimps, crabs also. Those are the crustaceans. So in those mudflats, do you find both of them? The answer is yes. So they protect the coastal areas from erosion? Yes. By breaking the waves, by reducing the impact of them. They can support simple life forms like polychaetes, but also crustaceans. So this is incorrect. They support the migratory species of birds across flyways, so by providing them access to food. Right? So this is basically the answer is B. That is 2. Good. 50% more, 57% of you have given the correct answer. See, understand, this was a region in news, that is Kerala's Kadalundi mudflat. That mudflat was in news. Why? And what is relevant for this from your exam point? Now, in this particular region of mudflat, you have significant amount of encroachment around the Kozhikode region, due to which the size is reducing. And more importantly, here you also have a river by the same name which drains into Arabian Sea. So tomorrow, if you get a question associated with a river draining into Arabian Sea with the same name, I hope you don't get confused by that. Okay? Now, consider the following statements with regard to acid rain recently in news. Acid rain has a pH of around 4.0, significantly lower than a normal rainfall which has a pH of 7. Countries like India, Thailand, Philippines, Russia have come together to form Acid Deposition Monitoring Network in East Asia, that is UNEP, to control the phenomena of high occurrence of acid rains. Which of the above statements is or are correct? Whichever portion you are not aware of, please don't have reservation that what is this factual portion, add it on. Okay? Normal rainfall, is it acidic or is it basic? Normal rainfall has got a pH of 5.0 to 5.5. So it is significantly acidic. Acid rain has a further reduced pH value of 4. So the first statement is incorrect because the normal rainfall doesn't have a pH of 7. Now countries like India, Thailand, Philippines, Russia, India is not a part. Here in the portion of UNEP, which are the countries? So basically you have Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Then you have China, Russia, Korea. These are the countries which are a part of it. India is not a part. So which are correct? The answer is D. That is neither one nor two. So let me see how many of you have given the correct answer. So number of you is less in that sense. Okay. Then with reference to laughing gull, recently in news, consider the following. These are migratory species of birds from Central Asia which have been sighted in India after decades. It has been listed as endangered as per IUCN. Which of the above statements is or are correct? Yes, I understand, Priya, that is a general action, but I hope that you don't gain that pleasure by simply clicking ABCD. I hope the purpose here is to learn something. So here, these are migratory. Laughing gull, it has been in news because it has been sighted in the Kasaragod region. So here, the first statement, are these the birds from Central Asia? No, from the region of Americas. North America in general. It has been listed as endangered. Incorrect. So here the answer is neither one nor two. So these are basically migratory species of least concern. They have a unique sound which is very similar to that of a human-based laughter, and hence the name laughing gull. Here 15% of you had given the correct answer. So please look into it. It was much in news. They are most common in the Atlantic and Gulf coast of North America and the Caribbean, Central America, and the northern portion of South America as well. Then consider the following about biohydrogen. What is biohydrogen? They follow the process of steam reforming for the production of hydrogen. They are similar to green hydrogen in terms of method of production. However, unlike green hydrogen, they can also be produced by the process of fermentation. Manohar, it can be country specific also, but generally it is global. But sometimes it can be country specific also. So here, they follow the process of steam reforming for the production of hydrogen, correct. So various different types of fermentation, steam reforming, formation of syngas. So biogas, that is having CH4, methane and carbon dioxide, from there hydrogen is extracted, that is biohydrogen. Okay, green hydrogen is what? From electrolysis of water, you separate hydrogen and oxygen by the process or the production of renewable energy, that is green hydrogen. Okay, so they are similar to green hydrogen in terms of method of production. Incorrect. However, unlike green hydrogen, they can be produced by fermentation also. Correct. So how many of the above statements are correct? The correct answer is B, that is 2 only. Okay, so that is the major difference which is present here, right? So majority of you have given the, so biohydrogen is produced from biogas, which has got CH4 and CO2 population. Okay. Now the last question with reference to the tiger orchids. So hence the orchid based question. With that we will conclude. With reference to orchids, consider the following statements. They can be found in mountains, rainforests and deserts as well. In India, the highest number of orchid species are present in Arunachal Pradesh. It is listed in Appendix 1 of CITES banning international trade. How many of the above statements is or are correct? Very good. So here, the first statement, They can be found in mountains, rainforests, and deserts as well. That is going to be correct. Right? Across wide diversity, you have a very significant variety of orchid population. And remember, we discussed about Humboldt enigma. Humboldt enigma, what does that tell us? That when we talk about mountainous area, where particularly the mountain extends from around sea level to a high altitude, there will be a great diversity. In Arunachal Pradesh, you have that in the eastern Himalayas. So that is where you have the highest orchid species which are present, highest concentration. It is listed as Appendix 1 of CITES banning international trade. This is incorrect, listed in Appendix 2 of CITES. So here you have B, that is 2 only, which is correct. Okay, so that is what brings us to the end of the discussion here for today. Please do revise overall around 100 topics that we have discussed in the portion of environment ecology. If you are careful and meticulous enough for all the questions and the surrounding areas that we have discussed, there is hardly any scope for UPSC to be puzzling you, to basically provide any kind of a shock to you. Today, one of the very important things that we have discussed is the skeletal framework and the mind map for the entire convention and the national legislations. Please don't let it remain as a kind of an annotation, as a kind of a PDF. Utilize that for your revision. Ensure that the revision period thereby for you is reduced, it is condensed, it is utilizable. That is why I have provided you with that mind map. I hope this is the session which was helpful for you. And this is something which has provided you a greater insight into the portion of environment ecology. We meet again tomorrow to discuss for the final time the other places which have been relevant in news at the same time at 7:30 p.m. We will meet for the discussion of the important places in news for the past year. If you have liked the content of the session, if you have liked the discussion, then do provide us the necessary encouragement by clicking on the like, share and the subscribe button. In the comment section, I want your analysis, and I also want to know how many questions have you gotten right in this entire series. So thank you for being patient enough. Humble gratitude for the kind words. Till we meet again tomorrow, take care of yourself. Goodbye. Have a good night. Thank you.